Hi everybody, I'm Jordan Weber. Today I'm going to talk to you about how to get into mobility training, stretching, whatever you want to call it, motor control, getting better movement pathways. That way you can live easier, do the things that you want to do with your kids, with your friends, be able to move in any way you'd like to without any pain. First thing I would suggest is having a 2 to 3 day strength and conditioning program, which includes mobility before your workout or before your strength. Okay, so working on foam rolling, stretching, active stretching or dynamic stretching, motor control or activation exercises, as well as dynamic warm-ups and power exercises before your strength. That way, when you do your strength, you'll actually be using the range of motion that you just try to improve upon, and you'll be working on mobility as you strength train. So your strength training is actually going to capitalize on the range of motion that you gain from stretching and from doing the self-myofascial release or trigger point therapy, functional range release, whatever you want to call it. So these methods can help us prepare the tissue for our strength workout. Then when we put that strength into use, into those ranges of motion, we actually are going to get better range of motion and strengthen those tissues as opposed to just stretch those tissues. So we're going to get longer term benefits once we use those muscles and tissues after we stretch them. The best thing to do after your workout is to perform your conditioning. I like intervals, 15 seconds on, 30 seconds off, or 10 seconds on, 20 seconds off, and then doing that about 8 times, okay? That, or you can do your long slow duration cardio training, whatever you prefer. But that's what I would do in that order, okay? So 2 to 3 days per week, have about 20 to 30 minutes of movement preparation or mobility before your strength and conditioning, making sure that you're focusing on each joint, stretching each, say, shoulder, hip, knee, ankle, getting everything ready to go, and then moving those tissues in a range of motion like dynamic stretching or like motor control or activation exercises before your power. Remember, power is something we lose over time, so that's something we want to do before our strength. And then while we're doing our strength, we're actually working on our range of motion. So you're gonna start to gain range of motion in your strength training. So in your strength training, you wanna make sure you have a push-pull core exercise and a squat and a hinge pattern. You also wanna be making sure that you're doing some single arm carries. Core exercises are anti-rotation, like planks, side planks, paddle off presses, or anti-rotation presses, and other types of things that stabilize the core. So that's how I would go about retaining and maintaining your range of motion. As far as how do you begin your stretching or where do you start as far as like what you should do, you should just look at some of my videos where I go over a full body workout. It'll go through my foam rolling, it'll go through my stretching, my dynamic stretching, into my power, all the way into my strength and conditioning. And you have to do that all together. You can't just focus on one thing every single day. So 2 to 3 days of strength training per week. If you want to work on mobility every single day, that's totally fine. But if you're not getting that strength and conditioning, you're not going to retain those muscles in those ranges of area, the range of muscle, the range of motion that you've been acquiring. So making sure that you put that muscle to use. That's my first suggestion if you're just trying to get started when it comes to mobility training. If you want to get into mobility pathways or Kinstretch or functional range conditioning, that's a separate alley. You do want to first get into your strength and conditioning program because one, that's going to be good for your overall health and well-being, your heart, your stress levels. That's really important for increasing growth hormone and helping you regenerate tissue with the strength training. So if you're not doing any of that, you're not going to get any of those benefits. Also, stronger muscles and bones, which is really important, especially if you're sedentary. So first start with your strength and conditioning. Then you might want to go into some self-myofascial release techniques, static, passive, active isolated stretching. PNF stretching would be, I would suggest to do on your off days. You could also perform some active stretches like some dynamic warm-up movements like split squats and lateral squats and hinges and air squats, on off days. But I would stay away from resistance training if on your off days. So in your off days, work on movement, have 2 or 3 days of strength and conditioning, and in your off days, like I said, focus on your stretching and your self-myofascial release and any type of therapeutic exercises like yoga or any type of stress relief would be really important, okay? So that's all gonna help range of motion. Obviously sleep is number one, number two is probably your nutrition, and three is what you do. All right, we'll talk to you later.